Happy good morning.
Good morning, Ramchandranji. Good morning. It is good evening for us here.
Good evening. You can't play with your grandchild. You can only change the nappies.
Bina, you have joined, so you're there, aren't you?
Oh yeah. Hi,
Hello.
Binaji.
Bina,
Good morning to you.
good
Yes,
morning, Bina.
Sajni, I can hear you.
Yes, so you can take over.
No, but
No,
I'm
no,
not
no,
sure
you.
about the connection because we're on the road.
You're on
Sajni,
the road, so
Hi KKG.
have a great holiday, Bina.
Hi Gulu.
thank you. Thanks, Sajni. Thanks so much.
Yeah, have a super time. Have a
Thank
super
you.
time.
When are
Thank
you
you,
back?
everyone.
When is-
21st.
Hey, that's
Oh.
a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Oh, more than 10 days.
That's right. Because we're
Where are you
driving, so we
staying?
thought we'll just plant ourselves there for some time and then come back.
Where are you off to,
Are
Bina?
you going to Panjim?
We're going to Goa.
Where are you?
Goa. Oh, very
Which part
good.
of Goa? Which part of Goa?
Bagator.
All right.
North
Okay.
Goa, Sajni.
North Goa. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice time. Have a nice time.
Yeah.
So I think we've got about 20 people by now, so we can start.
Let me put it on the speaker now.
You can start exactly at 10:05.
We've got 19
All right, so
people.
then we have another minute.
There are 19 people. 19.
That's good.
One more minute to go.
Yeah.
Yes, we wait.
Hello, Meena.
Hi.
Hi.
Good
Hi,
morning,
everyone. Hi.
Hi, girls.
Let's hear it. No, it's very painful.
Hi,
You can
lady.
reconnect.
Malati, are you ready? Malati?
I'm ready. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Okay, I think
Yes, Maltiji. Maltiji, we can hear you.
Okay. Shall I start?
Just, I think half a minute more, and then start. Sajni ji will take it from. It's 10:05 now. You can start, Sajni ji.
Right. Sajni,
Request
should
all
I
others
start
to
the
please
prayers?
mute. Please mute yourself. Others.
Shall I start, Sajni? I think Sajni is not able to hear us.
no, I'm there.
Shall I start?
Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this next session. That is chapter 9, and verses 29 and 30 of the Bhagavad Gita. A warm welcome to each and every one of you, and especially Mr. Krishnapani, who really takes the pain all the way from California to be with us and to take us on the right path. So we will start with the school prayer. Malati, will you begin?
Yes.
And then follow it by the Gayatri mantra.
Okay. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom, O hidden light, shining in every creature, O hidden love, embracing all in oneness, may each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Om Bhur Swaha तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भार्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भार्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भार्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्यो मा अमृतंगमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Thank you, Malti.
Welcome.
And it's now over to you, Mr. Krishnapani ji. Mr. Krishnapani.
Meena Nirula ji, you have the text. You can unmute yourself.
Sloka
Verse
29.
29. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Tavanu Shubha Shubha Phalaidevam Mokshyasya Karma Bandhanaihi Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mapukaishyasi Samoham Sarvabhuteshu Veshwasi Priyah Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya Mahiteshu Yachatyaham.
Please read the commentary if you have the Aurobindo's text.
Yes, I have. 29. Equal am I in all existences. None is detestable to me, none dear, and yet those who love me with devotion are in me. So too I am in them. The eternal, the divine eternal is the inhabitant in all existences. Equal in all and equal friend, father, mother, creator, lover, supporter of all creatures. But it is only this perfect adoration that can make this indwelling of God in man and man in God a conscious thing and an engrossing and perfect union. Love of the highest and a total self-surrender are the straight and swift way to this divine oneness. Verse 30. If even a man of... Shall I read the other meaning? Or...
Is there a continuation for 29?
No.
Then we can stop here.
Okay.
You can kindly mute yourself, Sajni ji and yourself, so that there's no disturbance. Right. Thank you. See, this particular verse very clearly says that the same and I am equal to all. Samoham sarvabhuteshu. The divine eternal is the inhabitant in all experiences. He is equal in all and the equal friend, father, mother, creator, lover, supporter of all creatures. Sarvabhuteshu, Sri Aurobindo has expanded and included all these terms because these are the terms which are used in the Bhagavad Gita elsewhere. If you see in some earlier context, he has said, I am the mother, I am the father, I am the grandfather also, and I am the friend, and I am the one who supports all creatures. Sarvabhuteshu is that. Samoham Sarvabhuteshu. And Name Dveshyosti Na Priyaha. Here, further he is saying he is the enemy of none and he is the partial lover of none. He doesn't hate anybody, he has no enemy, and he has nobody who is dear to him also. Now, this particular thing, we have to understand the inner meaning of it very carefully. One important aspect to be recognized here is that there is no provision for any kind of partiality in divinity. See, the law of nature and the law of universal consciousness is such that it is all inclusive, comprehensive, total, and complete in all respects. And there cannot be any place for partiality. Now, this particular thing has to be very clearly understood in the context of what Sri Krishna says in the 12th chapter. In the 12th chapter, starting from verse number 13 to 20, he goes on describing who is dear to him. Now, it doesn't mean that he is partial towards them. Whoever fulfills the conditions or the state of consciousness with which he approaches, he is dear to him. There is no question of any preferential treatment to anybody, including Arjuna. Arjuna is chosen because he has the right qualities to uphold dharma and assist Sri Krishna in the process. That's all. There is no other hidden agenda for him. Further, he goes on to say, when you come to the last chapter almost, he goes on to say that I can do this work without you also. He says to Arjuna that I can carry out all this without you also. There is no problem for me. It is only because there is some karma linked to it, you have been given this opportunity. If you avail of this opportunity, it is fine. If you don't avail of this opportunity also, nothing is going to stop or nothing is going to change. So in that context, this has to be very clearly understood where he says, Samoham Sarvabhuteshu. I am equal and the same towards everybody. There is nobody whom I hate, nobody who is dear to me. Whosoever worships me with devotion, ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya, maite teshu chapyaham. They are in me and I am in them. The only condition is their total devotion to me. And again, I would like to repeat, I have been saying this earlier also, don't imagine as though Sri Krishna is saying that you be personally loyal to me or personally devoted to me. There is no personal devotion to Sri Krishna. See, he is the embodiment of that universal consciousness. That in a particular avatara he has taken an embodiment does not deny the fact that he is the supreme. He is that supreme intelligence. So any appeal he makes, and wherever he says me, this me refers to the supreme intelligence functioning through that avatara, that's all. That is what is more important. This has to be clearly recognized. Otherwise, what happens is there is a possibility of understanding as though that whoever is dear to Krishna, whoever is close to him, whoever is placed in a manner where he has some association with him will get benefit. No. The fact of the matter is nobody could really benefit from him that way. Even Arjuna himself says, I did not know about you. I did not know about your divinity. He had to show him his divine, supreme stature and being in order to understand the implications of it. So proximity to an avatara does not automatically give you some privilege. Unless you have that purity in you, unless you have that ability to vibrate to that frequency of that divinity. So therefore, there is nobody who is dear, nobody who is close to me, nobody I do it. And none has he cast out, none has he eternally condemned, none has he favored by any despotism of arbitrary caprice. All at last equally come to him through their circlings in the ignorance. This is a very important statement of Sri Aurobindo. We'll be going in circles, going on, getting caught here and then going in circles and circles and circles out of ignorance. So one has to find a way out of this circle of ignorance. So that will anyway happen at last. The fact of the matter is, whoever recognizes this first, whoever recognizes this principle of divinity, of that supreme intelligence functioning through the avatara, will ultimately reach that. So that's why he says, all at last equally come to him. All at last. Finally, all of them are going to come to him through their circlings in the ignorance. Each one is caught in his own vicious circle, in a cycle of our own ignorance, making of our own ignorance. See, that is the issue that has to be understood. See, avidya or ignorance is the primary or primordial cause for getting stuck here. So that leads to the other two aspects. See, avidya leads to kama, that is desire, which is person. Kama leads to karma. Avidya, kama and karma, these are the three interlinked factors which one has to recognize very carefully. Why is it that we are caught in desires? Because of ignorance. And what does desire make you do? You involved in actions which are selfish by nature or which are limited by nature. When you say selfish, it doesn't mean something wrong. The fact of the matter is the primordial ignorance, we are surrounded by it, we are engrossed in it, and therefore there is no other way out unless you come out of ignorance. There is no other possibility at all. So therefore, this triad of avidya, kama and karma has to be very clearly understood. So you have to purify the desires, you have to purify the karma. Through that only it is possible to remove ignorance. That's why very clearly Adi Shankara says karma is for Atma Shuddhi. Karma is for Atma Shuddhi. So that Atma Shuddhi has to come about. Unless that Atma Shuddhi comes about, you will not be free of desires. The Vairagya will not come. For Vairagya to come, one needs Viveka, discrimination. So when he says I am equal, the fact of the matter is, it is true, he is equal. But if I am deeply engrossed in my own ignorance, then nobody else can really help you. That is the statement when they say even God cannot help you, is a truth, is a fact of the matter. God also cannot help you if you are bound in ignorance. You have to find a way out of it. And that way is through purification. That way is through devotion, to the exclusion of everything else. Ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya. Whoever worships me with total devotion, I am in him and he is in me. I am in him. The moment that statement is made, it is to be understood that you are unveiling, slowly removing layer after layer of that ignorance and finding more and more of the divine presence in oneself. We're able to find more and more of the divine presence in oneself through devotion. See, the another important aspect to be remembered is one cannot make a long list of all my deficiencies, all my vices, all my shortcomings, all my limitations, all my sins, or what all past wrong actions I have done. I can't make a long diary of it and then start removing each one. It can't be done. So that is why there is a beautiful comparison in the spiritual literature to this karma and how it spreads and entangles us. It is called as the giant weed. It is the giant weed. You know this weed, it spreads very fast and then holds on to it. Each and everything is linked. You see sometimes lakes in the cities are covered by these weeds. The entire water is covered by this. We have in Hyderabad, this is called the hyacinth. There's a particular type of weed. Long back, maybe 100 years or 120 years back, some English lady brought it and she thought it is very beautiful and introduced this into the waters there. You know what happens? It covers the whole thing. It takes a huge effort on the part of the municipal authorities to clear it. The simile is very apt in the sense this is called as the giant weed. It's all interlinked and keeps floating, and then by the time you get up in the morning, you find that it has covered another 2 acres of the water. Then you in a week or 10 days, it occupies the whole thing. So you see, so we can't take out each of these separately. So it is like like using a pesticide or an insecticide or a something which kills this whole thing at one time, at one stroke. You use a weedicide. Weedicide is actually a poison. It's not that way. Here, what I'm trying to only extend the simile or the analogy is that you need to spread that. If we can continue with that, the weedicide of devotion. What really kills all desires, all sins, and removes all these things at one stroke is that devotion, is that purification. So I cannot go on removing. See, even if there is a weed in the garden, we can't remove each one with hand, slowly picking up and doing it. And by evening, you will be tired. And then next day morning, it's again there and you keep. So that's how we spend our lives. So don't address and magnify sin. Don't address and magnify your own deficiencies and try to eliminate them one by one. This elimination by one process is not going to work at all. That is the reason why an integrated approach, yoga yukta. Yoga means an integrated approach. Yukta means being integrated. Yoga yukta means to being integrated in that. You should approach it in such a way that at one stroke, the whole thing can be cleared. And that it's not the theoretical question. It's a very practical thing. It may take time. It will take time only for two reasons. One is we want it. We do not want to eliminate all our desires. If we say that you eliminate all your desires, then you say, what about my family? Should I have a desire for my own well-being of my family, my children, my grandchildren, my this? So that is where we are stuck because we are not yet, we don't yet see the big picture. So eliminating all desires, one is this aspect of it, because some bondages, some linkages, some associations appear to be very pleasurable and happy, and therefore we ourselves want to hold on to them. The second reason is they are deep rooted. Desires are deep rooted. You have to take a U-turn. You have to make a U-turn. And taking a U-turn at a great speed is not possible. The pressure of several lives of karma acting on us makes it very difficult to take a U-turn. So what we need to do is to slow down the entire process first. Slow down all actions to a great extent. Why renunciation and going to a forest, keeping ourselves away from so many things, becoming a recluse? All these things are advised not just for the heck of it or as some practice. Mentally, we should be able to progressively withdraw from a lot of these unnecessary actions. So there is this slowing down process. Once the process is slowed down, it becomes easier to take a U-turn. So it has to be understood in this context that he has no preferences. Nobody is dear to him. No, he does not hate anybody. Only he who approaches him with that devotion, he will find his presence in himself. Maite bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham. I am in them and they are in me. So this idea has to be very clearly understood, that why it is called as no, he doesn't have any preference, he doesn't give any special status or special affection or attention to anybody, because the very nature of that universal consciousness is such. And Janaki Ramji has put it that beautifully. One example which he has given in the chat is sunshine and rain. Sunshine doesn't have any preference. Rain also doesn't have any preference. It rains on everybody equally when it rains. But if you go and hide yourself somewhere and don't allow the sunshine to come, it is your problem or my problem and not the problem of the sun. So the nature also teaches us this, because it bestows on us this munificence. The love of God is all pervasive. Without any choice, without any preference, without any special treatment being given to anybody. Whenever any special treatment is given, it has to be understood that that person richly deserves it and therefore it is given to him. Nothing comes undeserving. So that point has to be very clearly understood. I'll just read a sentence of Radhakrishnan also. He says, God has no friends or foes. He is impartial. He does not damn any nor elect any by his capricious will. The only way to win his love is by faith and devotion, and each must tread the path by himself. Each must tread the path by himself. There is no other choice. So each one has to go through that process. And the same idea is presented by Sri Aurobindo also, when he says, none has he favored by any despotism of arbitrary caprice. All at last equally come to him through their circlings in the ignorance. But it is only this perfect adoration that can make this indwelling of God in man and man in God a conscious thing and an engrossing and perfect union. Maite teshu chapyaham is this idea. This is being what perfect adoration, he says. Bhaktya. Bhakti is the beautiful word is used by Sri Aurobindo. He says perfect adoration. It is only this perfect adoration that can make this indwelling of God in man and man in God a conscious thing and an engrossing and perfect union. Love of the highest and a total self-surrender are the straight and swift way to this divine oneness. There are only two things: love of the highest and total self-surrender. This is the meaning of bhakti. Bhakti does not mean prayers, worshipping, offering flowers and fruits and other things, because we have seen in the 22nd verse, we have seen patram pushpam phalam toyam. Whoever offers me a leaf or a fruit or a flower or even water, I accept it, provided it is done with that great devotion. Only then it is possible. And as Sri Aurobindo very beautifully says, that is the surest and swiftest way, the fastest way to reach him. That is the most important aspect to be remembered here. Okay, then we can go to 30. Meenaji, you can unmute yourself, and everybody seems to have stopped their videos.
There is one more chat, Krishnapani. You have to read one more chat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We employ for removing weed in our garden a mali, but here we have to do it ourselves. It cannot be outsourced. Yeah, that is, we are the mali, and we are the ones who have to do it, because otherwise there is no possibility at all. Because the weed is not outside, the weed is inside. Weed is inside and not outside us, so we have to remove it ourselves. And we can't pull each weed separately and then try to do that, because by the time you pull one, two more come into the picture. Two more will come and occupy that space in our mind. Thank you, Janaki Ramji. Yeah, I am not able to see anybody here except Meena ji. Fine, no problem if there is any issue with their bandwidth, but I hope I am audible to everybody.
Good reply. Enjoyed it. Laughed a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall I read
Thank
the
you. Yes, please.
Api chetasritacarah yate mam ananyabha sadhu eva samat mantavya
Samyak vyavasito hi saha.
If even a man of very evil conduct turns to me with a soul and entire love, he must be regarded as a saint, for he is rightly oriented. The equal divine presence in all of us makes no other preliminary condition. If once this integral self-giving has been made in faith and in sincerity and with a fundamental completeness.
Yeah. And the meaning of this is very clear. He says, Apichet suduracharo bhajet mam ananya bhak. Despite somebody being extremely wicked in conduct, if a man worships me exclusively means not personally exclusive, as I said, to the exclusion of everything else, he worships the Supreme, then he becomes worthy. He becomes worthy, and he is deemed worthy for his resolution, whatever he has done. He has the samyak vyavasitaha. That means of a person of a right resolution and a firm conviction and resolution. See, there are no preferences. Again, the idea is here the same thing, but unfortunately, there is a great possibility of misunderstanding this particular verse. There is a great possibility of misunderstanding this verse, and therefore one needs to go into it very carefully. he is not saying that you do whatever you like, you just come to me, worship me, and then I will redeem you, and therefore you will be relieved of all this. No. You can't, the converse is not true. Merely being a sinner does not entitle you to approach him saying that I am surrendering you myself to you. See, there is a legal joke. A fellow has killed both his parents. And when the law takes a very firm stand, and when he is about to be punished, he goes on an appeal to the judge and says, see, please, you pardon me, I am an orphan. I don't have parents, no, I am an orphan. And therefore I deserve pardon. It doesn't work that way. You yourself have killed your parents, and you can't make that plea that being an orphan, you should be treated with mercy. So a sinner can't quote the scripture and say that I can also directly approach him and become liberated and surrender to him. The point to be understood is that everybody has scope. There is a scope. There is a provision for transformation, for transmutation for everyone. However sinful he may be, however sinful a person may be, still such a person has an opportunity, because there is nothing like being eternally condemned. There is nothing like somebody being eternally condemned, because the true nature of every individual is divine. Or Sri Aurobindo says, the equal divine presence in all of us makes no other preliminary condition. If once this integral self-giving has been made in faith and in sincerity and with a fundamental completeness, he is not putting any other preliminary conditions except why he says, if you have this integral self-giving made in faith and in sincerity and with a fundamental completeness, all have access to this gate. All can enter into this temple. Our mundane distinctions disappear in the mansion of the all-lover. There the virtuous man is not preferred, nor the sinner shut out from the presence. This has to be very clearly understood. The virtuous man is not given any special treatment, nor a sinner is shut out from his presence. It is only to that extent. It is only to that extent that it is provided that we are not closing the door. You yourself are closing the doors. By the committing of sin, you are involuntarily, without your knowledge also, you yourself are limiting yourself, binding yourself, and shutting yourself away out from the divine presence. It's not that he is closing the doors. We have created a wall around us. So, together by this road, the Brahmin, pure of life and exact in observance of the law, and the outcast born from a womb of sin and sorrow, rejected of man, can travel and find an equal and open access to the supreme liberation and the highest dwelling in the eternal. Everybody is having this thing. This has to be very clearly understood. Otherwise, there is a possibility of misunderstanding or taking it as a, we have this philosophy of convenience. Whatever is convenient to us, we take it. See, in almost all these cases, what happens is, as I mentioned about that legal joke, see, my wretchedness cannot be a claim on your mercy. Just because I am wretched and I am miserable and I am sinful does not give me any additional claim. See, that is not the currency which operates. You can't buy the mercy of God with the currency of sin. It doesn't help you that way at all. What helps is fundamentally you understand what you have done and be ready to face the consequences. Number one. Number two, the transformation should be such that it is not only repentance, but not repeating again the same sin. We have two terms, very beautiful terms in the Indian tradition. One is called Paschattapa. Paschattapa means feeling, guilty and feeling the heat of the consequences of one's own action. That means one is repenting. Repenting is one aspect of it. That means you are recognizing that we have done something wrong. One has done something wrong. But that's not sufficient. There is prayaschitta. Prayaschitta means performing an action which is going to eliminate the consequences of that sin completely and purify you to an extent that you don't repeat the same action again. As Janaki Ramji has quoted, see, the very beautiful parable, who will cast the first stone in the Bible. See, finally, when everybody goes away, Jesus Christ says to that lady, go and sin no more. Now, go and sin no more. You can't commit this sin again and again, because there will be no redeemer for repeated sins. So there is this possibility of misinterpreting and thinking that a sinner can simply walk into it and get away with it. No. And Radhakrishnan has beautifully explained this. If he repents after he commits the sin, he is freed from sin. If he resolves that he will never commit the sin again, he will be purified. If he repents after he commits the sin, he is freed from that sin to the extent that the consequences are not removed. Your repentance has shown you that you have to reap the consequences of it. And if he resolves that he will never commit the sin again, he will be purified. And he goes on to explain further. He says, the evil of the past deeds cannot be washed away except by his turning to God with undivided heart. This is exactly what in different language he has put what Aurobindo has said. If once the integral self has been given in faith and in sincerity and with a fundamental completeness. So you see the point to be noted is, and Radhakrishnan quotes the Baudhayana Dharma Sutra and says, let one feel daily repentant in mind, reflecting over misdeeds committed and practicing austerity and vigilance. By this he will be freed from sin. He says, let one feel daily repentant in mind, reflecting over misdeeds committed and practicing austerity and vigilance. Austerity and vigilance are for this purpose of seeing that you don't repeat it. You have to follow the path of tapas and vigilance. You have to be ever cautious, completely aware of your actions every time so that you don't repeat it. Tapasvi cha apramadi. The two terms used as tapasvi. Cha apramadi. Pramada means inattention. Apramada means apramatta. Being apramatta means being ever wakeful, ever attentive. So these two are required. Karma never binds completely. This is a very beautiful statement. One has to recognize and think about it carefully. Karma never binds completely. That's why there is nothing like eternal condemnation. There is nothing like being permanently cast away, because it doesn't bind completely and permanently. The sinner in the lowest depths of degradation has the light in him which he cannot put out, though he may try to stifle it and turn away from it utterly. See, one becomes hard-hearted and callous. This total callousness comes into it when one goes on repeating this, doing this same mistake, same wrong. Over a period of time, he doesn't feel remorse, he doesn't repent over it, and he loses that sensitivity to be to understand that he is committing some sin. So that callousness is there, but the sinner in the lowest depths of degradation has the light in him which he cannot put out. That's the reason why in some context, Swami Vivekananda says, I shall bow and touch the feet of the lowest of the human beings in terms of his character, in terms of his ignorance and sin. However sinful he may be, I will still bow to him and touch his feet, not because of what he is, but what is in him. Not because what he is for outwardly a sinner, but because of the simple fact that there is this divine presence in him also. That light is there, and that light is such that nobody can put it out. It may take 100 lives. It may take any amount of time. But still that divinity is there and it cannot be put out. You may make n number of trials to somehow stifle it and put it off, but it can't be put off. That is the beauty of it. God holds us, fallen though we be, by the roots of our being, and is ready to send his rays of light into our dark and rebellious hearts. The very consciousness of our imperfection and sin betrays the pressure of the divine on our hearts. See the beautiful way in which he puts it. The very consciousness of our imperfection and sin betrays the pressure of the divine in our hearts. The fact that we are repenting is an indication that we are able to somehow see that spark of the divinity in us.
It's connected but not coming on, so I think I have to
Binaji?
get disconnected, come back again on.
Binaji, your speaker is on. Yeah, I'll come to this chat slightly later. Then we'll come back to this. See, as I mentioned, all great saints and sages and these saint poets especially, and the bhaktas, we have this bhakti tradition for the past 500-600 years, which has gathered a lot of momentum, and so many great people have come, so many great saints and sages who have sung thousands of songs in praise of the Lord, and they achieved, they were liberated, they were freed from their bondage through this path of bhakti. Now, in almost all cases, they lament that they are unable to come out of their sinful nature. They are stuck in this, and their senses are not under their control and all. But this cannot be misunderstood again and think that they are in the same category as we are. I mentioned this earlier also, and I don't mind repeating it once again. As you go on purifying yourself, we find that even a small flaw in us will appear to be big. I gave you the example of a small black dot on a white sheet, on a paper or a cloth. It becomes noticeable and it gets magnified. So when these great sages and saints are repenting for their sins or their waywardness or their what he calls as the an inability to control the senses and all, it doesn't mean that they have the same quantum or same intensity of bondage to that desire. That means that last vestige of that desire, they are unable to throw it out unless there is that grace of that divinity or that whomsoever they worship. Whomsoever they worship. So that is the example of Tukaram, which Radhakrishnan quotes and says, "Fallen of fallen, thrice fallen am I, but do thou raise me by thy power. I have neither purity of heart nor a faith firmly set at thy feet. I am born of sin. How often shall I repeat it?" says Tukaram. Again he says, "I am void of understanding, needy and worse than needy. I cannot steady my mind. I cannot stay my wayward senses. I have exhausted effort. Peace and rest are far from me. I have offered thee perfect faith. I have laid my life at thy feet. Do now as thou wilt. I can only look at thee. O God, I trust in thee. I cling firmly to thy feet." Tuka says, "It is for thee to deal with my efforts. It is for you to see that when he is saying all these things, you cannot imagine and think that he is also full of sin and full of waywardness and unable to control his senses and all. This is that speck, that last vestige of that the selfishness or that desire or some this thing is clinging to me, and I am unable to get rid of that last piece of it. That is the basic idea behind all these things. Even if you see Annamacharya, Purandaradasa, you have this tradition, whether it is Tulsidas or Surdas or Kabirdas, in some way or the other, they have said that some small thing is still holding on to us, binding us, and then pulling us down. It's only your grace that can remove it, and my total devotion and total self-surrender to you is what is going to free me completely from this. See, I cannot go with a bucket full of muck and say that I have so much of this, you remove it, you wash it for me. No, it can't be. Most of it has to be done by us only at the last. Therefore, he says this verse does not mean that there is an easy escape from the consequences of our deeds. We cannot prevent the cause from producing its effect. Any arbitrary interference with the order of the world is not permitted. When the sinner turns to God with undistracted devotion, a new cause is introduced. His redemption is conditional on his repentance. Repentance, as we have noticed, is a genuine change of heart and includes contrition or sorrow for the past sin and a decision to prevent a repetition of it in the future. When once the resolution is adopted, the transformation of the lower into the higher is steadily effected. If we believe in human effort, the growth may be hard. Error, imperfection, and self-will are difficult to overcome. But when the soul gives up its ego and opens itself to the divine takes up the burden and lifts the soul into the spiritual. That is what happens. So you see, he says it's not easy, and it is not. You can't get rid of it. This thing because it is very hard. The spiritual progress may be very hard because error, imperfection, and self-will are difficult to overcome. Our adamantine nature, our foolish nature, our nature to hold on to these lower things, the things which we know are impermanent. And that error is ajnana. Error purely refers to ajnana, to avidya, which are very difficult to come out of, and therefore you seek to completely surrender yourself to that Godhead. And then see these verses, number 30, 31, 32, and 33 also appear to be like some interpolations in the Bhagavad Gita over a period of time, but you have to understand them positively. You see, depending upon the social conditions, depending upon how people were treated in those days, how these things were projected, these things are all shown to us, but they have to be taken in the positive sense, that all barriers are being slowly broken. Barriers of caste, community, race, religion, sex, all these barriers are slowly being demolished even by the time the Bhagavad Gita was written. Even by the time of Adi Shankara, there were a lot of prejudices against women, prejudices against lower caste people, people born into certain castes, and the other prejudice of thinking that one is a Brahmin or one is superior and all that. See, all these things, these barriers were broken at that time itself. That is what some of these verses indicate. So this has to be understood in the positive way. When he says, Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak. However evil or condemned he may be, if he approaches me with a single-minded devotion, he will be redeemed. This is not an automatic thing. This is not a single window concept or pass-through kind of thing. You have to undergo the process. You have to undergo it slowly. You have to realize it. But first of all, one should become conscious of one's sin or one's misdeeds and take a firm vow not to repeat it. These are the two important things in the light of which one has to understand. Then there are some Ramachandranji says that even Alladi's translation of verse 30 of Shankara gives there is as I said, there is a possibility of misinterpreting some of these things or taking them wrongly. And Ramesh Puttannaji says Shuddhikarana and Parayaschitta are prescribed. Yeah, see, but one cannot resort to this on a daily basis. One cannot resort to Shuddhikarana and Prayaschitta on a daily basis, because there are some mantras in the very strange mantras in the Sandhya Vandana which are likely to be misunderstood. Yadakhnat kurute papam tadakhnat pratimuchyate. Yatratya papam akarisham ratris tadavalumpatu. There are many statements like this. Yadakhnat kurute papam tadakhnat pratimuchyate. Whatever sin you do in the day, by merely performing Sandhya Vandana, those sins will be washed away. The misinterpretation is that means tomorrow I can start it afresh again. I will do afresh again the same kinds of sins and again do perform Sandhya Vandana and all will be washed. No. The Shuddhikarana and Prayaschitta should be a once for all, once in a lifetime thing. It's a once in a lifetime thing. You have to completely take a U-turn and then start this thing. This purification doesn't happen simply like that. See, for social customs and social things and all, there may be some prayaschitta karmas and other things, but from a spiritual point of view, these are prescribed for a sin committed inadvertently, unknowingly, through ignorance. All these factors are added there. So once you become conscious of that sin, immediately it follows by repentance and going through the process of what is called as prayaschitta, or not repeating it. And sometimes it is better to make amends also. Suppose I have hurt somebody by my word or thought or deed or whatever it is. One way of prayaschitta is to go and personally apologize to him. If I have caused a loss to somebody, make good that loss. On account of me, if somebody has suffered a loss, material loss, which can be, we can pay back or we can settle that, it is better to do that. Instead of the karmic process to be, taken up and then it will settle. Anyway, it will settle all accounts. The question of exhaustion of karma means all accounts are with everybody are to be settled. And obviously, as you delay it, there is an accrual of interest also. So prayaschitta and this shuddhikarana have to be very clearly understood and not to be considered as a daily process. Daily process in the sense that be conscious on a daily basis of what you are doing and what are the misdeeds you have committed and how they can be rectified, how you should be willing to undergo the consequences of it and not avoid the consequences through this prayaschitta. There is no question of avoidance. Then Ramchandranji says that the bhakti is to realize him here and now in every experience abiding within us as a source of contentment. Other words, discovering the source of one's fullness or purna. See, that is what it is. See, that's what I meant by taking a U-turn. See, now and here and every experience, as you have rightly put it, it has to be that way. It has to be understood in that context and done that way. Otherwise, it's not a one-time affair, sir. Sir, we always, the moment you become inattentive, there's a great possibility of falling into the old ways again. Falling into the old ways again. Otherwise, it doesn't happen that way. You have to take a U-turn. And it is something, it is not, as I said, as long as we are alive and have this body with us, there is a great propensity of doing all kinds of things because of the past pressure. You can't change the nature of a person so easily. We can't even change the nature of the body also so easily. If I want to suddenly shift from, I have been a meat eater for 40 years and suddenly want to change it, the body won't agree. It has to be a progressive thing. The body has to get used to certain things. Likewise, if I have certain, I am used to take only a certain kind of food, and if I want to change my diet, everybody suggests it has to be done progressively, slowly. You have to introduce it, and your system has to accommodate that, adjust to it, and then get purified. So this is a daily thing. It's an ongoing process, and it has to be done with that great attention. And that is how the transformation comes about. And as you said, you have to see that divine presence in us, divine presence in oneself. So once that divine presence is felt, the closer you move towards it, the greater will be the illumination and revelation of its own truth. After all, it is infinite. You cannot have a limited, one-time experience of that infinite. As you go on and go on and on and on, progressively it will become more and more illumined, more and more clarity comes, or what I call as prasada, that comes about, and it becomes clearer to you. And the more you are purified, the more easily it is approachable, and the more easily you can get rid of your karma also. That is why you see, inaction, total inaction is the greatest action. That is the difference between the West and the East. Unfortunately, we are also getting caught in the Western thinking process. For them, activity is most important. For the Western mind, activity is most important. And even for the Eastern mind, it's not different. It's not for everybody, but from a higher perspective, for us, the Eastern prescription is silence is the greatest action. Because it has been discovered quite early that the mind is the root cause of it, and the nature of the mind is it will continuously chattering, continuously scattered way of looking at it. It gets dissipated. All its energy gets dissipated and it behaves in a very wayward manner, and it is driven by the senses and the sensual pleasures and all that. So when the root cause is known, then for us the greatest action is silence. So there is this inward turning. Any amount of development outside from a worldly point of view is not going to help anybody, is not going to truly help anybody, because the nature of the jiva is such. The nature of the jiva is always, it is inadequate, it is limited, it is always searching for something, some purpose or the other, something or the other. That great search for, happiness. See, the linkage from the highest form of bliss to the lowest form of pleasure, it's all one and the same. It's all connected. The only thing is, it is in the most purified form and most ethereal and transcendent form is that bliss on one side, and the most grossest form is on the other side. But everybody is linked to the same chain. Some may find great pleasure in indulging in sensual things. Some may find great pleasure in indulging in intellectual things. Some may find great pleasure in spiritual things. But it is still pleasure that is driving us. Do we see this? Do we see the linkage? Do we see that this linkage to and this being driven by the search for happiness at all levels? That's what has to be, we have to overcome that. And as Janaki Ram says, Jiva must become Shiva. There's a proverb which is quoting and saying, Jiva must become Shiva. That's the idea. But I'm more interested in you to understand this linkage of bliss or Ananda or Paramananda at the highest level to the grossest sensual pleasure in which man and animal, human beings and animals and every creature indulges in. It has to progressively go through this process and understand the nature of the pleasure and then seek the highest in oneself. Okay. Then we can go to, yes, sir.
Mr. Bhabiji, does his Swabhava come into play?
Yeah, come again.
His Swabhava, in individual
No, that's what,
Swabhava.
obviously, see, your Swabhava is has to be understood. The
And
Swabhava has to be understood and then accordingly modify it. The Swabhava is nothing wrong about it. It is a limitation and it is something which has been accumulated over a long period of time. And that defines your Swadharma also.
Swadharma also.
That Swabhava defines your Swadharma, and you are given an opportunity by providing an environment, the best environment possible in every life from a spiritual point of view, not from a worldly point of view.
Yes.
Worldly point of view, based on our karma, one may be put into a lot of issues. But that is the karmic point of it. But that is the worldly part of it. But if you recognize the purpose for which it is done, the spiritual nature of it, and then if it is to be oriented towards that spiritual nature, then one should be absolutely grateful for whatever troubles and tribulations or problems that are given to one. Only thing is, don't add to them. In one's own lifetime, I cannot go on adding to that nonsense and then getting stuck in that. It has to be understood clearly that way. Janaki Ramji says everyone's Swabhava is divine in nature but covered with impurities. Obviously, Swabhava does not mean that. Swabhava, the inner indwelling divinity is there in everybody. But Swabhava is an accretion based on past lives. And it is both positive and negative. It not only talks about negative aspects of Swabhava. If one is of a very calm disposition, that also is a part of his Swabhava. If somebody is in a frustrated disposition and always, highly disturbed, that also is a part of his Swabhava. Both of them are you see, I would like you to go through that slide on Swabhava and Swadharma I have given in the Bhagavad Gita course at the School of Ancient Wisdom. If you see that and dwell upon it, we will get an insight into what is Swabhava and what is Swadharma. Okay. So it's already more than 1 hour. It's 11:12 for you and
Quite late for you.
yeah, 1 minute. Sarji Ramchandranji says the higher Ananda comes out of Purnatvam or completeness, whereas the lower sensual pleasures are reflected Ananda in Jiva. So nobody is saying that there is no difference, but the connection is there. The whole creation is based out of this strong driving force of pleasure. That is the connection which has to be understood. Now, obviously there is difference. The highest and the lowest, obviously they are the two ends, two extreme ends. But they are connected through an invisible line. They are connected through an invisible chain where everybody is seeking pleasure in some form or the other. See, for example, we are attending these classes on the Bhagavad Gita. Why are we doing it? Because we are deriving some pleasure out of it. Because it is giving some pleasure. That is also a pleasure. It is also a desire driven in one form. Do we see the nature of it? Do we see the nature of that desire? And should we get bound to this desire? That throughout our life going on listening to Bhagavad Gita or some other this or that, it doesn't help. See, one has to move forward on this link and move from this lowest pleasure to that highest bliss because they are connected. Otherwise, there is no purpose in creation. If they were to be disconnected and unrelated things, there is no purpose for the whole manifestation. The whole creation is sustained on pleasure, sustained on Ananda. Ananda in what form? Whatever form you seek. You seek sensual pleasure, you are that is Ananda for you at that moment. You seek some intellectual pleasure, that's Ananda for you at that level. You seek some transcendental pleasure, transcendental happiness, that's also a part of the same thing. So the basically, as long as this I sustains, as long as this sense of limitation, which is called as the I, sustains, it will be like this only. It won't be different. It won't be any different. Okay. Yeah, Ramchandranji has agreed and saying in a broad sense. Yes, it's not a question of broad sense or narrow sense. It is the invisible link from the lowest to the highest. Otherwise, there's no possibility of redemption, isn't it? If the lowest is unconnected to the highest, then there is no possibility of redemption. That is what he says. Even the vilest of men, vilest of the persons also have a scope to redeem themselves because of this connection, because of this presence of divinity. And what is the nature of divinity? Is Ananda, is Brahmananda. Anando vai brahmeti vyajanat is the Upanishadic mantra. Ananda is Brahma. So that is what is to be understood. Not that we encourage any of these things. Not that sensual pleasure, but they are a part of the whole game. They're a part of the whole game, and that's what is sustaining the game also. That is the factor to be understood. Okay. So I think there are no further points or questions to be discussed. So shall we close it, Sajni ji?
Yes, yes, I think we'll close it. Are there any questions or comments before we close? No, I don't think so. So thank you so much, Mr. Krishnapani ji, really for being with us
And-
week after week. We are eternally grateful to you for sharing all this with us.
It's all-
Thank you so much.
It is all mutual. And tomorrow, Friday, for you it is today. Today evening at 7 o'clock, we have a Rutambara Wellness program in which again I am speaking. It's on the art of happiness. It's on the art of happiness. For me, it is 6:30 in the morning tomorrow, and for you, it is 7 o'clock in the evening today. So, those of you who would like to join can join, where I'll be elaborating on this concept of happiness much more from a different viewpoint. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
So
thank you so much.
now, thank you so much, Mr. Krishnapani ji. And now I request Malati to do the Loka Samasta so that we can send out love, peace, happiness to all of us here and to everyone in the world. So it's over to you, Malati.
Yeah, can you hear me, Saju?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you, Malti. And we will have 2 programs tomorrow, one in the morning, one in the evening. And then Mr. Krishnapani ji will again be with us on Sunday morning. So
Yes, Sunday
all
morning.
this will be, yes.
We are starting the Atma Bodha, the small text which is in verse form. We'll be starting that on this Sunday. For you, it will be Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. For me, again, it will be 9:30 on the evening on Saturday. So we'll be starting that. And I request Ravi to post that poster. Binaji, I think, has already done it. Sajni ji, I request you to kindly coordinate and see that it is posted today.
I'll ensure
so
that
we
it's
can-
posted. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you so
And
much.
so thank you so much. So we'll be meeting Paniji today in the evening, again tomorrow, again on Sunday, right? So thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone. Goodbye, and see you soon.
Thank you. Krishnapani ji, thank you so much.
Thank you.